Hi, this is Ellen Broderick, and welcome to the Inspired Living with Ellen Broderick podcast. Today's guest is Kate Wilder. But let me say just a word about the podcast. I like to speak with people on this podcast who really inspire me, who I find are living from their heart in some way and living the life that they're meant to be living. It just seems like they're on a road that is worth hovering a light on for a little while. So Kate is one of those people, and I've known Kate for over 40 years. And the things that she has inspired in me are numerous. But I want to begin by just telling you a little bit about Kate, just a little bit of background. Kate lives in Moultonborough, New Hampshire, after having spent about 35 years in Boston. The home that she lives in is in the middle of nature, so she has nature surrounding her. And I love that she speaks about spending time with God's creation, because I think this is really the center of Kate's life path. Kate is an educator. She has taught writing and literature, and she has worked as the director of advising at the Lexington Christian Academy. And the favorite part of her doing that, she says, is helping the seniors when she helped the seniors write their essays, because she was able to truly help them to reflect on how they hoped to grow and more fully on their meaningful life experience. And Kate is also a spiritual director and has had her training at the PAX Center. Kate leads workshops, and the name of those workshops that she's currently leading is Prayer and Art. And in these workshops, she guides people to create with watercolor and ink pen, to write poetry and prayers, and learn contemplative practices. Kate says that color is one of her favorite ideas of God that God came up with, and humor and laughter are two others. And this is just, I think, a wonderful place to start. So Kate, let me start here. And let me say one more thing, which is that you are also a writer yourself. And you have a book that was published by Doubleday in 2001 called The House Where the Hardest Things Happened. And it is truly a inspiring book. I just reread it. I think this is my third time reading it over the years. And each time I have taken away just a real appreciation for the way that you look deeply at your life, at your connection to other people and your connection to the divine, and your place in the world, and something about claiming your own spot and as part of God's creation. So you also had received a master's in English from the University of Massachusetts in Boston, after was it a BS or a BA from Plymouth State, what's now Plymouth State University?
I had a BA in English.
English, yeah. So let's start with your childhood led you to, it seems in some ways, to the life that you have really crafted for yourself. And I wondered if you can speak about that, about how your experiences in your childhood led you to pursue the kinds of things that are meaningful to you.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great place to start, because I do think that my parents and the choices that they made were wonderfully influential in my life. My dad had been quite ill. He had cancer and had a nervous breakdown, and we had a difficult time when I was about 5 years old. My parents were kicked out of our church because my mother served alcohol at a very nice local restaurant, but to make money, she was 29 years old with 3 kids. She took a job waitressing, and they voted her out of the church because she served alcohol. So it was one of those horrible kinds of rules that continue to wound people to this day. But one of the gifts of that is that I had a lot of time in nature. So after my dad recovered from cancer and survived cancer, we moved to this farm here in Moultonborough, New Hampshire. So we had acres of ponds and brooks and apple trees and those beautiful tall whispering pines. And I spent a lot of time in that. My dad filled the barn with animals, and we had chores to do. And because of that, we didn't go places. We didn't take vacations like other families did, because we had, he heard a deal and got 100 chickens one day and came home with those, or another day he came home with a burro that he just had to have. And so because we were there so much, and because we didn't have a ton of money, we often didn't have a car that worked. We were there and we observed a lot and observed nature and spent time in nature. And I think something that influenced me as a writer is we often didn't have a TV. Because my father was hapless when it came to fixing something or organizing something. And so my parents would sit around at night and sing. And I realize now I grew up with the lyrics of Hank Williams and Johnny Cash and Loretta Lynn and all those incredible storytellers. And I grew up with that language and I would say with those rhythms and cadences and word choices, and they absolutely affected my observation skills and my writerly skills before I ever even knew how to articulate that. And both of my parents loved a good story. So I was someone who grew up with a lot of value around telling a good story or having met an interesting person. So all of those things really influence who I am.
Mm. Yeah, that's so beautiful. I was thinking about the fact that your dad survived cancer. And for maybe some of the younger viewers, that was back in the 1960s, and that was not the common outcome of a cancer diagnosis. And I believe that the people that were in the hospital with him, who also had of the people in the hospital, I believe he was the only one who survived.
That's right. That's right. It was a different time in terms of understanding of cancer. And he was in this big ward over at the Veterans Hospital. And he was the only one on his ward who survived. So, oh my goodness, were we fortunate for all the years that we got with him, and how thankful I will always be for that.
So, Kate, you had this life where you had the opportunity, due to some very hurtful events, but you had the opportunity to observe a lot and to be still a lot
Mhm.
on your farm. And I wonder if you will talk about the ways after well, when your family was when your mother was kicked out of the church, your family left
Mhm.
because of course there I think actually that that you had written that that you continued, you maybe and your brothers continued, were brought to the Sunday school for a period of time, but then that ended as well. um, and I wondered if you will speak about on the farm having all of this time. Will you talk a little bit about your experience of color and nature on the farm?
Mhm.
I mean, one memory I have of visiting your farm was you
Mhm.
showing me a fairy circle,
Yes.
and I had never even heard of one. So
Mhm.
there was something to me. I was in my mid-20s at the time. So delightful about a fairy circle and the story that went along with that.
Mhm. My grandmother taught us that story, which is that we had acres and acres of land, and there, some of it was fields, and so unmown fields. And sometimes you'd come across a circle, and our grandmother told us just a circle of wildflowers amidst all the, these other grasses, plainer grasses. And our grandmother taught us that that meant that fairies had danced there in a circle the night before. So there was this sort of combination of whimsical, certainly tough old New Hampshire realities. I mean, I like to say, they don't call it the Granite State for nothing. These are hard people with hard opinions. Also, so it was not all whimsy, but there certainly was whimsy. And there, and though my parents were kicked out of the church and we did not go to church, because they were singers, they sang a lot of hymns, and those old hymns about. When through the fields I wander and see this and that. So my understanding of God was very much had to do with creation, and this is God's world, and God created these things, and these things are for pleasure. And so I have this sort of peculiar theology, I think, that was a bit pantheistic in some ways, although my parents identified as Christian, but like many Christians, they loved Jesus. And loved those stories, but were wounded by the church. And when I think about Christianity, I think it's sort of like once I visited this parcel of the ocean, this portion of ocean that was just magnificent. The colors, the rocks, the way that the waves made their way into this cove, and it was extraordinary. And it was such a beautiful experience. And several years later, I brought a friend there to share this with her. And we got there, and there was McDonald's and Burger King trash everywhere. It was shocking how much there was. It was just everywhere there. And so we didn't even stay. I mean, it was just so horrifying that we left. And I think about Christianity a little bit like that. Like somewhere along the line, I got a taste of that first beach, but the beach has become very polluted. And it's a place where we hurt one another with our carelessness and with our ridiculous rules and our harshness. But there is that part of me that holds on to that beauty of some of those early, I think, hopefully purer lessons about who Jesus might be. I remember my dad saying to me once, I was a teenager and I was struggling with church things and trying to figure out my place in it all. And he said, Kate, Jesus will never, ever fail you, but Christians will fail you every damn day of your life.
Yeah.
And, he wasn't a really philosophical guy, but that was something that he shared with me that really stays with me and informs who I'm able to be. Because I am, I live back in my hometown. I retired back to my hometown with my husband about 6 years ago. And we attend this little church in town. And because there's something in me that believes a town should have a church, that there should be a place where people can turn when they need a coat or a gas card or a meal or some prayer. But it's a kooky institution to believe to belong to, and to believe in, because there's just so much hurt. So where can I find my way in that? And so that leads to this art and prayer that has become my own. And my friend Deb Kennedy and I, she's an artist who lives on the Cape, and she and I knew each other in Boston for a lot of years. And we now run these a couple of times a year, run a program called the Joyful Gathering. And we get people together who perhaps have been wounded in the church, but who have spiritual longings, who are very interested in mindfulness and in paying attention to creation and in what can it mean to know God through creation, and who perhaps enjoy color, which is something that we both really love. I love observing light. I love observing the way color changes. I love shape and all of those things. And I think that in those places, away from some of the garbage on the ocean, so to speak, if I can continue that metaphor, we can begin to come into that divine presence in a way that is, I hope, a bit more pure and a bit more prescriptive, or a bit less prescriptive rather, less prescriptive and more open to someone's own encounter. So an expression that I like is less about God and more God. So I don't want to sit around talking about God. I want to give people the opportunity for contemplative walks. I want to give people the opportunity to lose themselves in color or in line or in writing. And I think that those are holy encounters that can help us to move past the wounds that we all encounter and that sort of heap themselves on our shoulders. You live to our age, Ellen, and you've perhaps most likely buried your parents. You've had to say goodbye. Such sorrow. You've perhaps gone through a divorce, a death, the loss of dreams. It's we're not young, and it's the whole world isn't before us, and so we've got to come up with a way to take these things and to find meaning and to open ourselves to the lessons in those things. For me, art is a place where I can do that.
Yeah, I have a memory from the early days that I knew you, which was that we would both draw together and
Mhm.
sometimes one another. And
Mm,
when I would look at what you had drawn, I would really marvel at how you had captured, because very often it was a line drawing. How did you know how to do that? Like, what lines were important? And I think it
mm,
is connected to the amount of quiet observation you have done in the world. Uh,
mm,
so it continues to interest and inspire me. The
mm,
way that you use color, the way that you use line, the way that you take some of what I consider the most heart-opening passages from all sorts of spiritual paths and poetry and
mm,
whatnot, and you combine these, and it is a really special gift.
mm,
Um,
mm.
so I wanted to say
I,
that. Mhm, go ahead.
I want to just pick up on those early years of our knowing one another. Ellen was a grad student living on a river uh, north of the college town where I attended. It was a local college, and Ellen had this cabin on a river, and we became friends. And we would go and make wood stoves, and I would be freezing. Though I would try not to show it because I was trying to be as cool as you were, and we would sit around that fire and eat soup and draw. But what's interesting, Ellen, is I had quite a long period where I didn't draw then, because I think what happens is the world tells you who you are. And so I believed some of those lies about myself. And one of the lies that I was told was that I wasn't an artist. I and I believe that, and I think in families you sort of define this is the smart one, and this is the spiritual one, this is the artistic one, this is the mechanical one, this is the leader, this is oh, she's so shy, when we get told these things. In fact, one of the quotes that I was going through my journals before I came on with you, just to look at some things that have spoken to me, and one is this idea is, do you remember who you were before the world told you who you should be? She is still there. Go after her. And so after, of course I raised children and I worked. And so I'm retired now. So it's very easy to sit and have this peaceful contemplative life here on the pond as I look out, my window. But when you're in it, so this is that sort of third stage of life, the third, I call it. But when you're in that second third of life and you're raising children and working and perhaps trying to pay for a mortgage or rent or whatever those things are, a lot of things tell you who you need to be, and you can forget some of these other parts. And so it is incredible privilege that I am able to go after some of the things that I am able to go after now, like contemplative walks and spending hours drawing. And one of my great teachers in life is Mary Oliver, as I'm sure for so many of your listeners. She's one of our great teachers. She said, to pay attention, this is our endless and proper work. And boy, that resonated for me. I thought, oh, I love that. And then another line of hers is, attention is the beginning of devotion.
Mhm.
And I thought, I have been a devoted person. I can say that. I
Mhm.
have been devoted since I was a little girl to paying attention. I could sit and watch a praying mantis, or sit and watch, um, you know, a butterfly emerge from a chrysalis, or watch trout shimmering in the brook. And that's a devotion that's really important to me, even more so now that I am, in this third of my life, and I'm a grandmother. And I think that I have 5 little ones in my life. And it's really important to me to get them outside and get them making mandalas out of rocks, or collecting pine cones and seeing how many different ones there are and how many shades, and then getting them to draw those things. Because I think that that attention is the beginning of devotion. And I want them to be devoted. And I think it makes the world better when we pay attention.
Mhm.
We have to study Thich Nhat Hanh. We have to keep his words in us. We have to have him saying to us, breathe in, smile, walk on the earth as if you are kissing it with your feet. All of those teachers are so important right now. And you, of course, know this. And we want all of your listeners to know these things too, right?
Yeah, and I think they do. I think that it's such a good thing to be reminded, um,
Mm.
and for all of us. I mean, I find I can read the same passages over and over and over again because I am reminded, and maybe re-beinged. I
Yes.
am able to be more as a result of when I hear words or I see pictures that
Mm.
resonate with that true self within,
Mm.
then that is what happens. Kate, what you read first, was that your words or whose words were those?
No, that was not. That is someone named Erica Lane, and I don't even know where I came across that. So I have a daily book where I write down whatever words meant the most to me, and then I make myself just do a little ink drawing every day. And so these, sometimes it's, I'll take a picture of something with my phone that I've read, but I now have, I don't know if you can see, I have piles of these things, of these books from the years that just have little drawings and then quotes in them. And some of it is my work, but some of it is the work of others. But it's when those things really strike me. And it's interesting because sometimes if I'm agitated, which of course I am at times, agitated or uncentered, or just a bit lost to myself, I'll pull out a couple of books and I'll just sit and quietly look through them and see what some of my observations were, um, some of the surprises in my day of coming, upon a flower or a bird or something. But then these little drawings, and it just centers me. And again, it's these teachers. So it's Jesus and Mary Oliver and the educator Parker Palmer, who's so wise about growing old with wisdom, and Henry Now and Thich Nhat Hanh and Richard Rohr, who's a contemporary writer. He's out at the Center for Action and Contemplation out in Santa Fe, and I read him every day. And his work is so important about that we can't just be contemplatives. It is not enough to be a monk in this world. Then it must also lead to action. And to justice and mercy. And so he feeds me and reminds me of that important piece, and to try to figure out what on earth can I do. There's a project that I'm working on right now. I'm doing a series of portraits of elderly Ukrainian refugee women that I started. And there's a certain amount of conflict for me in this because I want to pay attention. And so for me, a way of praying into this situation is to look at a photograph and to try to capture lines and sorrow and fear and those things with watercolor and ink. And then I spend time thinking, does this do any good? Does this do anything? But I have enough people in my life who are artists and monks who speak to things like the butterfly effect, where this little thing happens here and there's effect way over here. So we can choose to live with hope. I can't prove a darn thing, but I can hope that in my spending time with a woman and her face and a moment in her life, and getting others to pay attention, and perhaps connecting my spirit to her spirit, that perhaps something happens. Perhaps there's some moment of peculiar strength. I don't know, but I want to believe that. You know, we call these things belief systems, which means it's a system we get to choose, right? That's my system. I choose to believe it makes a difference to pray for people. And of course, we need to be sending money to World Central Kitchen because they're there and they're making soup and they're feeding people like at all the points, you know, they're doing all that work. But there's also this idea of holding the world in prayer. It's something I'm willing to be wrong about.
Well, John O'Donohue, who you were reminding me of
Mm,
when you were talking about your own relationship to the divine, um, uh, also says that people, that the power of prayer and um, what you actually bring to the world when you do whatever the prayer is. And this is a prayer for you, it sounds like it, the painting and the attention, where you put
mhm,
your attention, that's, you're putting your energy there. And there's something about what that does in the world.
mm.
There's so much distraction in the world
That's
that
right.
to
That's right.
hover your attention somewhere for an extended period of time um, is prayer. And
Mm,
he talks about a woman who he met once because somebody, a fellow, um, uh, somebody who lived in his area said, you have to meet this woman who he had never met, who lived not too far away, but up in the mountains in a way. And he said, if she was uh, asked about like spirituality or um, um, some of the contemplative practices or whatever, she would not know what you were talking about, but
mm,
that she in fact prayed very deeply and
mm.
fairly continuously. And the man had said to John O'Donohue, uh, uh, you need to get this woman praying for you. And
Uh,
he went and met her and asked her if she, and felt the same way, that indeed this was a woman who was totally connected to her spirit
mm,
and was
mhm,
totally devoted to attending to the pain and the sorrow that was in the world
mm,
through
mhm,
prayer. And
mhm,
and she said, indeed, I will pray for you. Now she's dead now, but he said shortly before his death, he
mm.
said, I'm sure she's still praying for me.
Yes. Well, and that's a beautiful way of thinking about eternal life. That all of that energy, that prayerful energy, continues and mingles. I love the word you've used a couple of times today, hover. I love that word, you know. And as I think about this idea of art in color and praying in color, I think for me, I've had a situation in the past couple of years where there have been people I care very deeply about who were in very, very dire situations. And I wanted to pray for those. So the way that I used to pray would be, oh God, I pray for, oh God, I pray for this and I pray for that. And so really, really what I was doing was I was bringing all this agitation into the world. I was like flinging my worry everywhere. And also, you know, you notice that line, I'm praying for, like there's all that ego involved. And it's what a what an odd way to pray. I'm so grateful that I can quiet down and I don't need to tell anyone what I'm doing, and I don't need to say it's me doing it. If I can get into that place where I'm experience a divine connection, and for me sometimes, you know, it's just a dot, Ellen. It's I'll just pull up a, you know, we can talk about these things, but for someone to, you know, this is a page. I was praying for a person here, person who was in deep trouble. And as I let myself be taken with the beauty of what happens if I add one more drop of water to this color, what happens to it? Then another. Then if I add this color over here, and I get lost in this interesting flow, I guess is what I would call it, with that person's face very much at the forefront of my experience, and with my sensations of my feelings for that person, I get lost in a way that is profound. Um, and I believe that there are, a couple of people for whom this has been a part of my life the last couple of years, for whom it matters. Uh, and it is a way to bring that great love. I mean, this is what it is. God is such a small word. It's such an inadequate word. I don't like to use it, but it's a shorthand, it's a quick shorthand. But I would say words like divine love or loving presence or comfort. I think those are the kinds of things that I mean when I say that word. People mean all kinds of things. Um, but that's what I mean. And so for me, with color and particularly with watercolor, because it's so watery, because it's so flowing, I can reach a place in prayer that's important. I'm just going to say it. I'm going to claim that it's important. Why not, right? Why not?
Yes.
Other things are also important. This is important too.
The Rumi quote comes to mind. I'd love to sing as the bird sings, not worry about who's listening or what they think. It seems to me
Yes.
that's what you're talking about, that you are in a place where you are singing as a bird sings. You are painting from your authentic self. And the other phrase that occurs to me is open-heartedness, because in
Yes.
your writing,
Yes.
there is this attempt to not leave people out. And you don't even leave people out who you've been hurt by and your family has been hurt by. There's something about wanting to genuinely understand others and keep your own heart open, not shut it. And I'm sure that there are times, as for all of us, when it has closed up at,
Sure.
in different
Sure.
aspects of life, but it seems like another devotion that you have is to be open-hearted, and to see
Yes.
and to leave room for others to have open hearts as well.
Yes. And of course we know these are our great teachers. These hurtful people in my life, what great teachers they are. And so what is that transformation that can happen? Do we remain in an embittered, hard place, or are there things? And I don't mean to say, yeah, I guess I'm saying either or. There are these embittered, hard places. There they are, and there's great learning to happen there. And so being open to all of it. There's just so much to see. We don't want to miss it.
No, you don't, and you don't miss much. I mean, there is um, the choice that you do of bringing, regardless of what you may either get from other people or wonder about other people in terms of your spending your time this way. It's a gift to the world. And it's a
Thank you.
gift because you are holding your part of what Stephen Cope would say is, you're part of the net. And and it's not your place to know the whole, right?
Yes.
And so you can only listen really deeply to what your
Mhm.
heart tells you to do.
Mhm.
And this
Mhm.
art as prayer um, and leading your life still in deep connection with nature and in
Mhm.
devotion and observation. Um,
Mhm.
I say yay.
And thank you. And I loved your interview with Stephen Cope, and I've listened to it, I think 3, if not 4 times now. And there were those, this is one of these things that's so important about this podcast. You are a person who makes connections with people, but you don't leave it there. You don't leave it for yourself. You take that out and you want to share that with others. And so I'm so grateful for that work that you're doing. You're a great connector. I think you've always been that way. I knew you as a young woman. You had that then, and I'm so grateful that you can do that now. And you meet someone and you don't keep it to yourself, you share it. So thank you for letting me be one of those people to share in this beautiful work you're doing.
Well, thank you, Kate. Kate, can you tell people who might want to learn more about you? Do you have a website, and how would people learn more about the
Mhm.
work that you're doing?
Mhm. I think the website is a good place to begin. It's a joyfulgathering.net. So that's 3 words, a joyful gathering. It's all is one word, .net. And I think that's a good place to see the work that both my friend Deb Kennedy and I do together. So we include our art pages. These are just sketches, sketching pages, just, not published finished works, but what our journals look like, because people just keep asking, can we see what's in there? Can you show us? And there are parts of that are private, but there are parts that we are ready to show. And you can also, I have one article that I wrote, or essay that I wrote, called "So Can Colored Dots Be Prayer?" And I like musing with that and having conversations. So people could certainly check that out.
Wonderful. And I'm just going to hold up. This is the house where the
Ah,
hardest things happened. You may see it
mm.
backwards. I don't know how it comes out on
No,
the
it's
screen.
showing. Mhm,
Okay, good.
mhm.
And I highly recommend. This is a wonderful read. So, well, thank you so much, Kate, for being having a wonderful conversation with you about your work and your way of being in the world. And I am sure that it is bound to give permission to others to really follow their own. And it may be color, it may not be. It may be
That's right.
music, it may not be. It may be, I have somebody who's going to be coming on the podcast who is a mechanic and a race car driver. And that is, to me, I sense that that is really his piece of the net. So,
Yes, yes.
so
Yes,
any final words,
wonderful.
Kate?
To pay attention.
Mm,
That is our good and proper work.
mm.
Let me use Mary Oliver's words, a beloved teacher. Um, let's pay attention. Let's hover, to use your language. A word I'm using a lot this year is linger. And I love the word because the word itself makes you do that. Linger.
Little
That is my prayer.
poetic.
A little bit of that, isn't it? So that is my intention and my hope for your listeners and for you and I in our friendship, that we can hover here in this place. We've worked hard to get to this point, Ellen, so let's enjoy it together.
Absolutely. Once again, thank you, Kate, and thank you to our listeners. This is the Inspired Living podcast with Ellen Broderick and my guest, Kate Young Wilder. Thank you.
Thank you.